When you have a hard day, you're not thinking about the perks of the job. You're thinking about, why am I actually in it?
Yeah, that free pizza lunch isn't going to be great after that day.
You don't know what a lukewarm pizza can do for you, though.
Welcome to We Are Human, the podcast that dives deep into the lives of those who work in medicine, but do not let medicine define them.
Each week, we're bringing on healthcare professionals to share their stories, their victories, but also their pitfalls, and more importantly, the ways that they keep themselves human throughout their career inside and outside the hospital.
Because while medicine is a big part of what we do, it's not all of who we are. I am so excited about who we have on the podcast today.
Oh my gosh, it's going to be awesome. I can't wait.
Yeah, he is truly one of the guys that, I don't find myself to be a very funny person. So I love watching people that just crack me up, and his content is so funny.
It is the best. It's the reason I really started doing like the style that I do is because of people like him, really. I am just so excited and honored for all of you guys to hear Paul Tran, Elementary School here on We Are Human. Paul, how are you doing today?
Guys, I'm blushing a little bit because I'm right here listening to you. I mean, very, very kind of you, and the honor is all mine. It is exciting to just be hanging out with you guys today, and it might be a 4-hour-long conversation, so buckle up.
Hey, I'm ready. And Paul, no pressure, but you are our first guest on our podcast.
Well, now I have all the pressure in the world. You
All the
shouldn't
pressure
have
in the
told me
world.
that, because now I'm going to have the best quips. I'm going to try to be very insightful with perfectly timed quotables by me, of
Quotable.
course. I'm going to cite myself.
Potent
Yeah,
quotables.
We have to get that short form content, right?
That's right.
We have something before we want to dive in, but before we get to that, could you just introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us some about you, where you're from, and what you currently do in medicine?
Absolutely. I am a pediatric gastroenterologist now, finishing up my third year of being an attending, which almost seems like a decade of when is this going to end? Like searching for the light at the end of the tunnel. Because people don't really realize that pediatric subspecialty training is 6 years of 3 years of residency and for the most part 3 years of fellowship training. So slogged through that, and I'm in Phoenix now at Phoenix Children's Hospital, where I'm a clinical pediatric gastroenterologist. I'm a GI hospitalist, actually. So I've crafted a career where I'm only in the hospital and I don't really have clinic. And then I wear really two other hats. I'm a big medical educator. I'm a co-director of a clerkship of the pediatric clerkship at U of A. I teach first and second years clinical skills at 2 medical schools. I mentor a lot. I do a lot of medical education research. And then I have all of my social media and platform building on the side. So I wear 3 hats that sometimes stack very, very nicely on top of each other. And sometimes they really feel like they're falling all at the same time, and I'm trying to catch them before they hit the ground.
Paul, I'm trying to think of when we first started working together. I know it was a similar process of how like Tommy and I started through Andy, through
Wait, so
writing.
Tyler, he beat you at a push-up challenge too? So you've
I'm
never
out.
won a push-up challenge?
I'm out. Bye, everybody. Y'all can do push.
I don't even need to compete. We've never competed in a push-up challenge because he just accepted that he would lose.
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair. I mean, like he's got ×3 dad strength now. I can't compete with that. Like
That's right.
True.
No, but when we started working together in a similar fashion to Tommy with like sharing your stories, and like I said to Tommy before, like trying to find people doing things outside of medicine that were really special. But you were a really big inspiration for me, Paul, as far as my own content creation. And I didn't really see myself as like a medfluencer, so to speak, or that's just not the way that my brain operates, or like the creativity aspect. I'm a fiction writer when I'm not doing medicine, and like I see comedy and story through that. And so that's what was really special to see someone like you that you're doing both. You're combating medical misinformation. You're talking about the the process of medical training and inspiring medical students, but you're also making like comedy and comic skits and pointing light at the absurdities of this process. So I'd love if you could tell everybody listening a little bit about like how do you go from the brain space between those two kind of models of creation, and like what's kind of your process to come up with some of the comedy that you do?
It's a really good question because it's changed. And you reached out to me and we connected, I think on Instagram, before my current kind of hat of skit comedy and sketch comedy. I think I went through 3 distinct phases in the content that I was creating. The first content that I was creating was pure advice. I saw a gap where medical students and residents weren't really getting the true mentor figure or advice on how to navigate. And it was just more like rant about problems. Here's how you study. It's like, where's all the in between? So I was making advice about it, about how to get feedback and present well and succeed on rotations. Talk to nurses as a resident. And I had a follower who replied to a post where I said, I'm going to change the culture of medical education, or I'm changing the culture of medical education. He's like, no hate, but how are you changing the culture? It seems like you're giving us advice to succeed in a present culture. And I've shared that story. I'm like, man, that really blew my mind. And it was a member of my community, small community at the time, really having a refining question. And then I went into phase 2, which was purely as a new attending, facing imposter syndrome, finding my professional identity, and wanting to reach my audience. I started doing tons of memes. It was just like meme after meme after meme, just easy to make. And then like shortly after we connected, really most of 2024, it was pure skits and how to create this comedy that I realized people on these platforms, especially short form media, want. Short form video is really meant to entertain. And I say it all the time. I'm like, when are you scrolling TikTok, doom scrolling, or just swiping on Reels, TikTok, YouTube Shorts? You're doing it when you're sitting on the pot. You're doing it when you're standing in line at Starbucks. You're doing it when you have a 10-minute lunch break, or you're waiting outside the OR for like bird dogging and the residents like text me when the patient comes around the corner. You're not doing it when you're like, all right, we're going to create today. I'm going to study. It's going to be a great day. Can't wait to scroll TikTok and learn about pyloric stenosis today. Like that's a different venue. So I realized that people want to be entertained. They want to engage in entertainment on these platforms. And then in the process, if I learn something or I'm inspired by something, then great. So that was my personal mission, at least the content that I create, the sphere that I'm in. So really, I have a small notepad I carry around with me. And I like that analog. Whenever I have an idea or something pops into my head, or I just have an experience, I learn from that collecting stories mindset. I'm like, this is a great story, or it could be a great story. And a story can be very short, 7 seconds. It can be a minute long, an hour long, but I'm collecting stories. And then I'm just like, this is funny to me. And I've almost refined my sense of humor to the point where I'm like, this made me laugh out loud thinking about.
So impressive. One of the ones that I don't even know if it did well. I just remember seeing it and I just laughed and laughed and laughed. But it was one where you were a first day medical student going to a new rotation, and you literally go to like every place in the hospital looking to like find where you're supposed to be. And like, cause I could just relate to that so much. And I just thought it was the funniest, most relatable that every medical student that's ever existed has experienced.
That's music to my ears, because if there is a secret sauce, I think, to social media, at least short form video, it is relatability and authenticity. It's like, I live for the comments that are like, how did you know what I went through literally today? Like today,
Like,
I just did.
just got done feeling that. Yeah, I just did that. Yeah.
I'm watching your short right now because I can't find my attending, and your short is about where's my attending.
Yeah, have you seen Dr. Smith? Oh, Dr. Smith retired
Yeah, he doesn't work here anymore.
like 9 years ago.
Well, Paul, I know sometimes you say that you feel like the hats are falling in every direction, but somehow you're managing to do it. And I have to start this entire talk off with a very, very important, serious question for you. Okay?
I'm ready.
Can you name the muscle, the medical term, or the dinosaur name? Are you ready?
I think I was born for this.
All right. This is it. This is for all the marbles.
Ready.
Term 1, irritator.
The irritator is a dinosaur.
You got it. Oh my gosh. I thought I was thinking of that one. All right. Start off easy. Get a little harder. Term 2, volatantus.
That is a dinosaur.
That is an eye floater.
An eye floater.
Muscae volatantus is a form of an eye floater.
Oh, bam. Stumped on my own game.
I would have said dinosaur as well.
All right, I got one more for you for redemption. You ready, Paul?
Ready.
Dolores.
Say that one more time.
If you need spelling too, I can give it to you. Solaris.
Yes. Could I have spelling and the etymology of the word, please?
Coelurus.
Oh, that's a dinosaur.
That is a dinosaur.
That is so awesome. So, Paul, we
Nicely done.
we came up with this game because on our last episode, Tyler and I were talking about how just social media sometimes could land a little bit wrong. And he was telling me a story about your guys' first video about mussels and dinosaurs, how maybe the comment section was a little rough.
By rough, you mean started an international war online. I think, actually, when you think about criminals in the country of India, there are hardened, probably like capital punishment. Like there are people who are there for really bad reasons, have done really bad things. And then there's Tyler, who is there merely because he has triggered the entire country, the subsection of people in medicine, but essentially people who think that he does not deserve to be a medical student, does not deserve to be a physician, because he is so poorly trained at distinguishing dinosaurs and muscle names.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm not even allowed in the country at this point. It's been a struggle. No, I mean, I don't think there's ever been a joke that Paul, you and I have thought out and planned, because we've made a lot of content together. We've done a lot of skits together. I don't think there's ever been a joke that we've prepped for where we've been so sure that it was going to land and to be so wildly wrong.
When I say that, by the way, I'm so glad that we can laugh about this now. But when I say that Tyler and I have had many a conversation about putting a disclaimer on future videos or changing the way that we even script little competitions like that, or just the mere conversation of, do we need to take this video down? These have ramifications that transcend well beyond a stupid, fun quiz show. And it's like, okay, how do we deal with the wave of triggering emotions and trauma that is the comment section sometimes on all these platforms that we create on? It's crazy. It was this existential crisis of, do we belong?
So for listeners who didn't hear from the last episode, the purpose of the skit that we were trying to poke fun at me being a fourth year med student in peds, not being in a surgical, specialty, a lot of the things that we learned first year of med school kind of, don't stick with us unless we're actively practicing them because they're not necessarily pertinent to our day-to-day life as a physician. That's why we specialize. We can't have doctors knowing everything about everything. And so to poke fun at that, there's a lot of very obscure muscles that sound very similar to dinosaur names, as you saw, also just medical terms in general, as you saw at the beginning that we did with Paul. And so we did a bit on that, and I certainly, off the cuff, when you're not prepping for it, even with Paul, when you don't have the spelling in front of you too, and you're just listening to it, you don't even have that prompt, which is hard for some people to see. Just to poke fun at it, and boy, did it go in the worst. I think it got 1 million views in the first couple days, and I'd say of the thousands and thousands of comments at that time, maybe a couple of them were positive.
Yeah, it was overwhelmingly not just negative. It was overwhelmingly angered.
Yeah,
they were angry.
That's
comments.
just wild to me. I think something bad in the world must have been going on at the time, and people just needed to displace anger somewhere. They're like, "This video is silly and stupid. Let's just put all of our anger right here."
And I was telling Tommy this too. It's pretty funny when you read some of these horrible comments that are like death threats for me, or calling for my license. And while you're reading them, above the top, there's just these funny pictures of dinosaurs. But honestly, as Paul said too, apart from the negative comments I got about, my qualifications for being a med student or maybe future qualifications for being a physician, the death threats that there were too, the scared part about it was that because I was a 4th year med student, there was a point in time where I was legitimately concerned that this was going to affect my ability to match this video, this silly video.
I think that's something
there.
that, medical students have to be aware of that and have to be, cautious with that, because at the end of the day, a silly little video can, lead into some big issues later on. Now, I would hope that any program director would see that video was nothing, should not be taken bad. And if they had issues with it, you probably don't want to go to that residency anyway.
Yeah, I will say, to where I ended up, I did a second look, and when I came in there, it was shortly after that this thing went viral, and I was met with people recognized me from the dinosaur video, and I was petrified that they did, but they met it with comedy. They're like, "Oh my God, that was so funny!" I don't think I got half of those right either, and so that also just goes to show when you're at the right place that understands what you're trying to do and the message too. It makes all the difference.
It also shows that, you were petrified just like those dinosaur fossils that you got wrong. You have to have a dad joke. You have to have a dad joke in every single episode.
That is a great segue to get into our questions for Paul today. All right, so Paul, on our podcast, we are going to be asking a lot of our interviewees questions throughout their journey in medicine. So if you could just tell us about your path into medicine, and I know you told us a little bit about where you're at now, but how did you get to become a doctor?
I started with Southeast Asian, more specifically Vietnamese refugee parental expectations of you will be a doctor or an engineer or else. And that's
honesty.
all I need to say.
I love the honesty right out of the gate. He's like, we're saying it.
Let's just say that stereotype is very real. But here's where it comes from, actually digging deep. My dad came over as a 16-year-old with nothing in his hands but a sweater and a Bible. He got onto a cargo ship. After there's this crazy story of he flew out of the country because his uncle was a South Vietnamese pilot and borrowed their cargo plane, got all of my dad's family, about 50 plus members, snuck in as Saigon was falling, flew out to Singapore. Then he got onto a ship and ended up somehow in America with just a Bible and a sweater. And my mom was a typical boat refugee. And my dad said, you know what? If I could go to Notre Dame not knowing English, carrying a Vietnamese English dictionary, and then if I can make my way to Princeton and get a PhD, really with nothing. No, my family didn't grow up with a lot of resources. That's what he told me in Vietnam. He was like, they live modestly. They live comfortably but modestly in Vietnam. So he's like, if I can do that with very little, except for motivation, except for a vision, you have a lot more that has been handed to you, and you should be able to take advantage. That doesn't mean you're expected to only succeed in one area, but you do need to be able to use what I've been able to build, and you need to go beyond what I've been able to build for myself. And it was this mentality, whether there's bad that you can tease out of it, I think there was this mentality of, well, success is not necessarily achievement, it's also effort. I think that planted the idea of being a physician, but it really was going through my journey of childhood, being a competitive figure skater and navigating into college, that really I came back to medicine. I saw a pediatric geneticist talk to a family about Prader-Willi. And it was a couple of PhDs at Duke who were getting the news that their child would have severe intellectual disabilities and would likely struggle with up through like elementary education. And I saw this compassion, this incredible patience in talking with this family, that I said, wow, whatever that is, that level of trust, that level of empathy, that communication, I don't know if it's exactly that, but I want that. And I think the roots of medicine and definitely the roots of pediatrics got a hold of me there. That really was a foundation for me. And then I realized pretty late into college, I think by junior year, that I wanted to commit to medicine. And so I got a master's in physiology. It's kind of a gap year. I did a special master's program and then ended up doing med school in Colorado. So it was a nice journey. I've been all around the United States, but I think refining my purpose was so big. And it goes back to that story of compassion, trust, empathy, and really impacting a family in an incredible way that they were unprepared to do on their own.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible,
That
man.
is so powerful. Wow.
Uh, uh,
Yeah, the story about your parents are just um man, talk about some great parents to look up to, and a father that a mother and father that I don't know, succeeded against all odds. That's just so awesome. And such great role models that you had to help you along your journey.
I
Absolutely.
think it's really wonderful that the message that your father was saying about not necessarily that you have to do a specific career, that, that's not the expectation for you to do, as we kind of joked about at the start of it, but the expectation being that you should apply yourself in whatever that may be, and that everyone is, starts off on a process, the life that they are born into, um, and but like the ability that you are able to apply yourself with the love that your parents are also showing you, and the work that they laid out for you as well, is, I think that's a really important message that I think, we kind of go into medicine sometimes with preconceived notions, or we even think we're going to be a certain kind of doctor, and we stay very myopic and rigid on that path. But really, to become maybe the full doctor, the full physician, the full human we should be, it's more about applying ourselves, not knowing the answers. There's so many times we have to come up with a solution, or address a problem without having all the facts. But the things that we can control, we don't have to be the limiting factor as far as our effort and applying. And I think it's beautiful that was something that was ingrained so young in you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so Paul, it seems like, right now you're an attending and I'm an attending as well. And oftentimes it seems like attendings have it all together. We have a really cush life. It's like the best thing in the world. But that isn't always the case, and it hasn't necessarily been easy to get here. So were there ever times in medicine where you felt like giving up, or that it wasn't worth it, or maybe burnout was severe? Could you kind of tell us about those times and maybe how you overcame them?
Well, talking about an attending shift and a mindset, there is no imposter syndrome that compares to the imposter syndrome in your first months as an attending. Like, you think it's bad when you're like entering medical school, entering clinical rotations for the first time, or even when you become a physician for the first time as an intern. You have supervision. Like, your decisions don't have that much consequence. But when it's just you, when a patient is looking at just you and you realize, wow, there is no one looking over my shoulder. There is no one who's actually supervising me. I get to choose what I think from my experience, from my knowledge, and my insight for my patient. And hopefully there's shared decision making there. But your name is at the end of all of those orders, that note, that consultation as a specialist. There is incredible imposter syndrome. I think I luckily was able to navigate that imposter syndrome just resting on the fact that I had built a really good foundation and I had applied myself during residency and fellowship. I had really tried to become an incredible physician. And I think I started as a good physician and I'm continuing to chase that incredible physician title. But my training included one episode of Burnout in fellowship. Actually, my first year of fellowship, I think October, I remember calling my best friend who's a PEM, pediatric emergency doc, and he was just chatting about what we were going through as fellows together. And I said, I'm at a point where I'm not feeling myself. I am beyond tired. And this was before Jack, my firstborn, was born. This is October, and he was born in December. And I was like, I'm just beyond tired. I don't feel like going to the hospital tomorrow. I just don't really feel right. He started asking questions, and he's like, "Dude, you're actually burned out. You have burnout right now." And I was like, "I think I'm depressed." He's like, "No, you're burned out. You are completely exhibiting almost a checklist of features and symptoms." And that really was an eye-opening moment for me, because it was the first time and probably the only time in my career in training where I did not look forward to the next day, where I was like, ugh, I'm going to have to drag myself, or someone's going to have to drag me to the hospital. And I find myself very, very fortunate in that, because I found a career that I love, that I look forward to doing every single day. And I feel doubly blessed because I get to do it. And how many people find a field that they love? Being an astronaut, I love space. I want to be an astronaut, but how many people actually get the opportunity to be an astronaut? So I feel really blessed to be able to do that. But that burnout is heavy and it's real. And I didn't think that I would ever lose some of that enthusiasm and passion. But when you're in it, it's almost like you don't know what's happening to you.
Yeah, I can relate so much to what you said about imposter syndrome. I love medicine. I loved medical school. I loved residency. I loved the long hours. I loved being an attending. But my first week of being an attending was my hardest week in all of medicine. Like, harder than residency, harder than medical school. And a lot of it was because of imposter syndrome. And I was by myself. Day one, I had 15 adult patients that I was seeing all on my own. I was the only one that they were going to see. I was the only one putting in orders. I was the only one making the decisions. And on top of that, it was probably some of the sickest patients I've had throughout my time in medicine as well. So it just made it for a really, really hard time. And so I can definitely relate to that. And I think Tyler could probably relate too, that every step along the journey, you are going to battle imposter syndrome, whether that's going from medical school to be an intern, as Tyler could probably talk about, or going from a senior resident to an attending. Imposter syndrome will follow you. Tyler, would you agree?
Oh my gosh. My first rotation of being an intern. I think it had been about 4 months since I had seen a physical patient, between like match and your time off, and I also had finished fourth year early because I had taken a med leave, so like my fourth year started early, and so to go from that gap of actually seeing a patient to the block that I was doing was a very high turnover service at a nearby hospital where it would not be uncommon for you get 10 patients that you're pre-rounding on. The next day you come in, you have 10 completely new patients. The next day you have 10 completely new patients. And Yeah, so I immediately on day three had a panic attack and was like, I don't know anything. I was I'm the exception, to being
Hmm.
hired. And then now, I'm rounding out the end of intern year. I do feel like I found my flow, and I'm feeling like I understand the process. And now that I finally feel comfortable being an intern, uh, 2 months from now, I'm going to have some interns that are going to be looking at me with those wide eyes, and I'm going to.
Right.
So, like, you're right. There's never, and that definitely makes me feel better to hear, or maybe scared to hear that even as an attending, like that feeling isn't going to go away.
Yeah.
Um, but Paul, something you said that really struck with me about when you were going through burnout. Because I myself went through a process in med school too that I conflated a lot of burnout feelings with feelings of depression or feeling off. Like there's so much on this path to medicine that we normalize that when you take a step back, it's not a normal way to
Not at
live
all.
life at all. And so like it's not at all out of the realm of realistic for you to be like, oh yeah, I feel a little off, or maybe I'm feeling a little like depressed, and someone who can have a clear picture be like, no, man, you're burnt out. Like this is like you just don't see the signs because you make so many micro decisions to normalize this process that the longer that goes on, you lose sight of the person maybe you were. And I think something I try to stress to not just med students that rotate with me, college students I talk with, but even high schoolers, like the habits that you're forming now for how you deal with stress, for how you deal with your passions, for better or for worse, they're the habits that you're going to stick with, especially if they work, and even if it's a bad habit. So the decisions you're making now, like really think about what kind of person, what kind of physician do you want to be 20 years from now? Because I really believe if we look at some of the jaded physicians in our lives, the ones that uh, you see all the time where like a pre-med comes in like bright-eyed, excited to hear, and the first thing that comes out of that doctor's mouth is "Don't go into medicine." Like it's like all the time, and
All
I,
the
I
time.
I truly believe that you go back to how that they handled stress, or they handled maybe the signs of burnout, or things like the things that they cut out of their life to make it work. Maybe I do believe that they probably started some of those habits around that time.
And I think you are a reflection of the habits that you keep. That's James Clear. That's a mindset of atomic habits overall. That habits are just a vote of confidence for the identity that you're assuming. I mean, you are your habits. I think very real. And I think one of the things that I have talked a lot about, I just gave a talk today to high school students entering medical fields. And I said, this whole journey, we've talked about it already. We've talked about imposter syndrome. We've talked about comparison to others. And comparison, we know, is the thief of joy. Teddy Roosevelt said that. It's so incredible how easy it is compared to other people to assume, are we belonging? Are we doing everything that's necessary to belong? We consistently ask ourselves, are we doing good enough? And then you can have a positive aspect of it, like the achievement focus. Am I doing good enough for promotions? Am I doing good enough to advance to the residency program, the fellowship program that I want? Am I doing good enough to position myself for the career that I want? Consistently, this whole process, whether it's medical education, medical training, or medicine, as you said, 20 years down the line, you are thinking, am I doing good enough? Am I doing good enough? And I implore people to think about, are you doing enough good? Because the whole process in flipping that makes it from a self-centered and something that's intrinsically selfless, serving other people, it becomes selfish when you're accumulating things for yourself rather than pouring onto others. Am I doing enough good? Turns it on its head and makes it about other people, serving other people, making an impact on other people. And I think that is really helpful to have not only as a mindset, but also to think about practical ways to do that. And I talked about 3 different things you can do, like number one, like clarifying purpose over perks, like the perks of the job, the perks of medicine, pay, reputation, status, respect. They're perks, but when you have someone dying in front of you, when you have a hard day, you're not thinking about the perks of the job. You're
Right.
thinking about, why am I actually in it? Otherwise, you're just like, I'm not going to deal with this. I don't need to do this. I have other
Yeah, that free
alternatives.
pizza lunch isn't going to be great after that day.
You don't know what a lukewarm pizza can do for you though. Like when you talk about holding off burnout, there is nothing like a Papa
Yeah.
John's, like a little
Okay.
garlic dipping sauce right there.
People complain about the pizza, but to me, I'm like, hey, that's free food, and that makes me happy. Yeah, I can
No,
bring me the
I'll,
pizza.
no, I'm going to eat the pizza. I'm not saying I'm not going to eat the pizza. I'm just saying that maybe it doesn't solve all my problems. I'm still going to eat
That's right.
it.
It solves a lot of mine.
I'm telling you, purpose over perks. And perks
Yeah,
includes pizza.
Purpose
yeah,
over pizza.
I
Purpose,
love that.
purpose over pizza and perks.
And then Paul, what was the next two?
The other two are number two would be having a refining way to develop skills. You know, instead of stuffing your resume with the promotions dossier. Like when you become an attending an
Right.
academic center, it's like promotions. Like you need to prove that you're ready for promotions. Instead of stuffing your resume at every step of the way from a pre-med all the way to that, think about the skills that you're acquiring to serve your purpose. So if my purpose is to serve other people, am I acquiring skills that make me better at that? Communication, number one, empathy, active listening, being able to explain things that are very, very high level into something that's very digestible. These are all skills that we can accumulate along the way. And thinking about skills rather than accomplishments is just a practical way to approach that. And then the third thing really is just the reflection and refining. I love to ask myself, and I like to challenge other people to think about how am I getting better every day at making someone better or getting someone better. And that can apply to medicine. Like how am I getting better at my healthcare delivery? It can apply to educators. How am I getting better at educating today? And really any way that's service oriented, you can think about how can I improve the service that I'm giving. So, yeah, I think that's really powerful to be able to have some framework when we all go through this process by necessity.
Yeah.
Like you have to go through this process. How do you keep some of your humanity in the process?
I love that plug there at the end. Yeah, the
You're
humanity in the
welcome.
process. I love that. Well, Paul, I think everything you said was so wise. I think that's going to benefit the listeners. And something that's so important to note is we've talked a lot about medicine, but imposter syndrome extends through all fields. It's not just medicine. It's literally in every career people probably experience it. And so we talked on two big topics here: burnout and imposter syndrome. It might be helpful for the listeners if maybe each of us give one tip to like help reduce burnout and to reduce imposter syndrome. I think Paul just gave us quite a few for the imposter syndrome piece, but maybe if we could each give a quick tip really quickly. Yeah, I can go first. For imposter syndrome, something that I like to do is journaling. And so I keep a victories journal. And so this might be something that I did during my day in medicine. And I could give you an example. My first week as an attending, I was obviously battling imposter syndrome and I was afraid to death, and didn't think I was adequate, didn't think I was ready. And I had a patient encounter where, I went through the steps like perfectly, in terms of physical exam, looking at vital signs, getting an ultrasound, and saw they had a pericardial effusion. And within minutes, it was drained and the patient lived, right? And so, I write that in my journal to say, like, look, I was ready for that, even though I didn't feel like it. So just to reaffirm myself. And then when I'm battling imposter syndrome, I go back and read that journal.
I love that. I mean, I think that I don't want to say the exact same thing. I certainly am a big journaler, and I think like if anyone listening right now can take away something from here. If you've never journaled before, it's kind of an uncomfortable process to start, maybe, and you feel maybe like you may feel that you are like not good at it, or you may feel that like someone's going to read it and judge you, but you have to remind yourself that it's just for you. The process of putting down your thoughts to page is one of the best things that we can all do for not just like getting the answers we need to some questions, but to learn about ourselves and to find peace in ourselves. So I totally agree, Tommy. Journaling is a huge thing for me. Honestly, a practice that I've done this year for imposter syndrome has been just reminding myself to say as much as I can when it's true. I don't know. And I think that is also something that a lot of just in being in medicine, we struggle to do because we feel like maybe in the training we have to have all the answers, and it really gets in the way of growing. It really dangerously can get in the way of patient care, because like if we pretend like we know what's going on and then don't seek out answers, then we're not doing anyone any service. To quote Ted Lasso, "Be curious." I love the idea of that. You know, the more we just look for answers to the things we don't know, like any given moment, any given patient encounter, no matter how bread and butter it may be, there's a learning opportunity. And so in the times that I feel like I don't know what I'm doing, I'm an intern, I've got an intern brain, I try to remind myself to be curious, and that, yeah, today I'm going to feel maybe a little bit like an imposter, but maybe tomorrow when this comes up again, I'll feel less so. And that wouldn't have happened unless I stayed, curious and asked questions. It's all about growth.
Yeah.
I love those. I mean, I'm going to add on to that because I think both of those are absolutely critical to maintaining yourself in the process. Number one, it's like cleaning out the junk drawer for whether it's journaling or reflection. I mean, everyone has that junk drawer that has every single possible thing in it. It's like keys, flashlights, like pens, like very important things, documents. And it's not until the once a year or even less frequent that you clean it out and you're like, wow, I could have used this 6 months ago, or now I've bought multiple copies of this.
Yeah.
Like, do you have a way to clean out your proverbial junk drawer, professional junk drawer, even at some interval that's not when mandated once a year? Is it like once a month, once a rotation if you're doing rotations as a med student or a resident or a fellow? Vin Zhang is this communications coach who's a huge creator, and he says his advice for becoming a better storyteller is be a better collector of stories. And we get stories like this all day long, and unless we document them, we don't we don't recall them as well, even if they're really vivid emotionally. So I think having some way to document, whether journaling and then some way to reflect, is very important. To Tommy's point, I think, Tyler, to your point, I would add to that I don't know to combat imposter syndrome. The biggest practical application of the growth mindset for me is the word yet. And I love that. It is so powerful to be able to say, I don't know yet. I'm not good enough yet. I don't belong yet. Like, you can still say the same things like with imposter syndrome, with holding yourself to an exceptionally high standard. You can say yet because it's acknowledgement of that moving target. It's acknowledgement of the fact that you are constantly striving to achieve and you've never arrived. I think it's so powerful. And everyone uses the growth mindset now as like a cure-all. Like, no, that girl dumped me. Well, growth mindset. My wife left me. Growth mindset. I didn't get the job that I wanted. Growth mindset. Yeah, I think the practical way is just, how do you apply the growth mindset? Add yet to what you say to yourself.
I love that. That is so valuable. So Paul, before Tyler asks you maybe a deeper question, I just wanted to ask you something that Tyler and I asked each other during one of our episodes. What is the most medical student thing that has ever happened to you?
The most medical student thing that ever happened to me. I've shared this story, but what made me, what created me, the darkness, the bat cave that created me, elementary school, was this really old, kind man. His name was Alfred. Speaking
of Batman,
I'm Batman. This isn't a car. I had a third-year rotation in OB-GYN, and I remember, to this day, I remember very clearly the resident's name, but this person almost seemed to have a vendetta against me for some reason. Maybe it was the energy I brought in, maybe I was just not calibrating my humor, whatever it was. But I would have experiences like all throughout this week on gynecology, oncology, essentially surgery, where I was in the OR, and I think I finally got warm enough with the team to be joking around with them, to be singing with them, to be humming in the OR. And I remember one day, like, I was the only guy in the room. I was like, singing Barbie Girl or something like that, like, like along with the team, and everyone's singing, humming, and then not a word of feedback to me, not a word of anything, just kind of almost antagonism, cold, clipped, curt, all the C's. And 6 weeks later, at the end of the rotation, well after it's over, I get the feedback, and she had given me feedback, the senior resident, of it was very antagonistic overall. And one of the comments that stuck with me was, when you sing or hum in the OR, you come off as uninterested, and don't do that. Essentially, it was like, I wish you had told me that in person, and looking back, it's like, maybe she was really meaning to be like actually kind and saying like, hey, like the attending's looking at you and grading you, like, make a good impression. This is your only chance. But it wasn't delivered to me in person. It wasn't ever even hinted at. I was only met with antagonism, or so I perceived. And then to have that, and then I had to talk to the clerkship director afterwards about it. It was just like, why is this the way it is? Right. I think that experience is probably not that drastic, but it's what medical students go through every single day, every single rotation. So like, I've almost made it my mission to combat the feedback culture that we have.
So I think every med student could share an eval story or a feedback Friday moment that just is their Batman moment. One of my favorite ones I share is, it's actually not mine. A friend of mine in med school who's in general surgery right now. But he did this very grueling away for gen surge. He was on top of his stuff. I mean, this guy, I think he got, I don't even know how many like case reports he got out of the block, and he was the first one there, last one going. He like was crushing it. And after all that, he got his, eval from the attending, and it said, Shell was my medical student.
Period.
No, that was it. Like, that was it. Nothing else. Yep. And I think it was like a 3.5 out of 5 or something like that. It was like, almost like a dot phrase that maybe he forgot to fill out. But and I just remember my friend coming to me being like, maybe if I didn't do anything, I would have gotten the same feedback. Like, there was, oh man. But it's true though. It's true. It's a shame. And I think sometimes we joke about feedback Fridays being not so helpful sometimes, because it's about, we learn about things after we've had the time with them, and then now we're with a new attending, or we have new med students going through. So it's like, okay, I'll try to use that for next time. But then the next person we're with, maybe they like things a little bit differently. And so I've always found the rotations that I had were the most meaningful, where I felt like, even if it was not a specialty or something I was interested in, the times where I felt like I grew the most were the times where whoever I was with really did like feedback forward Fridays, where it was, let me set expectations now, and this is what I want from you, this is what I hope from you, what are your expectations for me? And then when we have this conversation in the week, we can be like, hey, these are the things that we set up to set the stage, and here's how we met them or we didn't. Because otherwise, the feedback is, how do you grow from something where you don't get a chance to learn from it?
Right. Yeah. I think every medical student that listens to this can definitely relate. Yeah. Paul, so we talked a lot about medicine. What are some things that make you Paul Tran outside of medicine?
I think the things that really stand out to me, that really make my core identity, are, I would say, faith and family. I became a Christian in residency, actually, right after I met my wife. It was her faith and her being so grounded in faith that really inspired me to explore really what that meant. And I realized at that point that I had very much a am I doing good enough mindset. I had a very much focus on how much I was achieving at work, my professional identity. I was dating a lot at the time, trying to find fulfillment in someone, a partner. I didn't realize that it was like a big hole that was missing. really like a why, a why instead of a what I was doing or a who I was dating or with. So that is something that's really important to me, and it's made me very, I think, aware of the things that I need to really refine in myself. I have a lot of pride. I still have a lot of pride in my accomplishments, and I've seen a lot more opportunities open, doors open, rather than places I found for myself, or things I found for myself. That's something that takes up a lot of my wife Elizabeth and my time. We love serving a local church. We have a small group that we host. It's something that's really important to me. And then my family is ever growing. I have a new 2-month-old pre-med baby, but he's joining a 5-year-old brother and a 3-year-old brother. So I have 3 boys that keep us really busy.
Wow.
Yeah, so we love life just together. And I think one of the things about me is I'm always building and creating, and it's taken a lot of very frank feedback from my wife, who's very wise and very patient, to be like, hey, the ultimate person or people you're really called to impact and have to impact are your sons right here. Like these 3 boys, they're going to be, and your wife, but like all 4 of us, we're going to last longer than your career. We're going to last longer than your platform. We're going to last longer than anything that you do. So, what do you want to do about it? And and I think that sort of refining feed forward, if you will, Tyler, I think that's really something that's been very helpful. So those 2 things are things that really define me, outside of work, outside of medicine. Overall.
Oh my gosh, I could not love that more. As a husband and a father, I relate to that so much. So when I first started dating Phoebe, I was like, I'm a very selfless person. Like I give a lot of myself to everyone. Well, then I get married and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like the most selfish human being in the world. And then, we have our first child and, at that point I was like, Phoebe, I've really become more refined and now I'm really a selfless person. And then I have a child. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm still like the most selfish person in the world. So I can relate completely to what you're saying, Paul. And I think having wives that keep us in check is probably the most rewarding things. And I think it definitely makes me into a much better father for sure.
100%.
Yeah. But so medicine, I'm sure having a medicine and having family can be at constant ends with one another, right? Like I know there's times throughout, and it sounds like you have a 5, a 3, and a 2-month old. So you've had them throughout your journey. How did you manage going through medicine and building a family? Like a lot of people will say that doesn't make sense and you shouldn't do it.
I mean, number one, I have to say, well, I'm a guy, and I truly, I'm like in awe of moms who go
Same
through it.
here.
I am just like, gosh, the struggle that I had as a dad, as a support person, as someone who wasn't nursing, as someone who didn't have to labor, and as someone who didn't have to go through pregnancy pains and discomforts. I was like, geez, I was able to do it because my wife is incredible. But acknowledging for real that it does take 2. I mean, it took 2 of us. It took a lot of sleepless nights. And I wonder, Jack was born during my first year of fellowship when I was on call constantly. I'm like, how did I get by with a newborn and being on call? Well, only because Elizabeth was like
Your wife.
just the strongest person, ever. But how do we do that? How did we actually go through? Because there we look back at pictures, and we're at the park, every afternoon, and on the weekends, and we're celebrating Halloween and first birthdays, and I think it was really a choosing to be a dad, choosing to be a husband. I think there was a choice there. And then something that is as real as last week and the past several days is my wife Elizabeth asking me to consider what are the areas of my life that I need to be excellent in versus want to be excellent in. And there's only so much of us that we can give. And she's like, for me, Paul, you want to be the best dad and the best husband and the best neighbor and the best friend and the best endoscopist and the best clinician and the best content creator and the best podcast host and the best writer and the best this. She's like, there's going to be some domain and there's going to be many domains where you have to be okay with just being enough, being good enough. What of those do we have to agree on? You have to be excellent. You have to choose. You can't just be like, well, I want to be excellent in everything. There's taking pride in what you do, and there's spending the energy, the effort, and the time needed to be excellent. Some of those things you don't have to be that. And I'm like, geez, you're really wise. You're really, really, really wise.
Yeah, I think I needed to hear that today. Honestly, I like that. That is so profound, and I think maybe we should get her to start doing some lecture circuits. I know you're a great speaker, Paul, but I think that she might be able to change some mass audience lives here, because how many med students going through rotations and the things that they do outside? I mean, I think about I don't have a partner or a child right now, but some of my co-residents who do, and sometimes they ask me a question like, "Hey, how are you able to like write this book right now while you're in?" I'm like, that is not. I feel like that is nothing compared to what you're doing. Like, if I had to come home right now with the bandwidth I have and take care of another life, like I can't imagine. But they also have, they have wonderful partners and support systems. But like, I don't think we're told enough to think about the areas that we need to excel in, or where we can be good enough. And I'm sure that like that one point alone, the bandwidth that has saved you, I can only imagine.
Oh my gosh. Mother's Day will have just passed when this episode airs. And so, I think one of the most important things that Paul said is just how incredible women are. Like, I have to say, I am in awe every single day with my wife and how she was able to go through residency and carry our son and be 37 weeks pregnant in the PICU working nights right before delivery, right? And I don't think residency programs and the medical institutions really do enough for women who are bearing children and have families. And so just a huge shout out to all the moms out there in medicine, outside of medicine. Absolutely. You guys are truly incredible.
100% agree.
Well, Paul, I think this has been such a fun episode, and it's been an honor having you on the show. Before we leave, just one question that we'll just end with to ask you is, how would you recommend all of our listeners to stay human in whatever their career is, but specifically for us, that'd be maintaining their humanity in medicine?
If you want to stay human, I think you have to remember the humans around you. And it goes back to ultimately, those of us who go into medicine, I think all at some point have an idea of what's the trademark, like helping people, right? That's every single pre-med's answer to why medicine is helping people. Well, people is the reason. So I think to stay human, you have to remember the humanity around you. I think when you dissociate and see your patients as pathologies, or you see your patients as visit numbers, or you see the things that you're studying as just another step for you, I think it dehumanizes completely, and then you lose some of the humanity in the process. So I think constantly remembering the other people around is just a very core, fundamental way to keep your humanity. So for me, applying it for myself as a content creator, if I lose sight of the audience on the other side that's consuming, watching, listening to my content, if I lose sight of the audience, I'm going to lose some of the humanity in that process that made me want to create content in the first place. As a physician, I think about the patient and the family on the other side of the bed, on the other side of the conversation. And really, as a person, as a neighbor, as a friend, as a father, as a husband, I think about the person or the people who are around me. And I think that's, to me, a practical North Star, I think, that can help maintain some humanity in the process.
I love it, man. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom, your wife's wisdom too, which is it's going to be sticking with me for a very long time now.
Yeah, when do we get to book her for the podcast?
Yeah.
She's on next.
Hey, tomorrow. She's a PA. She's in medicine, and I feel like sometimes, I think she really is the 80% of my content. Like I'm really parroting or refining what she's saying.
Love that.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, man, thanks for coming on. It's been a blast as always. I love hearing from you. Have to say, for everybody listening, go check out Paul in elementary school and all the wonderful things that he's doing and continuing to do with both med ed, comedy, advising, everything under the sun. And special thanks to Hippocratic Collective. You can find all of our episodes and other podcasts like these on hippocratic-collective.com. Until next time, stay human. Thanks, everybody.